house. Let me hear your bar. Let me see you bite. Let me see your scar. You know what we about. Come see us in the yard. This is war. Golden Ripper hard. Dogs in the house. 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 Dogs in the house.
Hello and welcome to All We Hear is Purple. We're the third or fourth most mediocre Husky football podcast on the internet. I'm Andrew Berg. I am joined on the panel for this kind of dour but hopeful week. First by Mark Schaefer. Mark, hello.
Hello, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Turning around the greeting a little bit. Also joined by UW Deputy Editor Raymond Lucas Jr. Raymond, how's it going for you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right, well, let's jump into this Penn State game and talk about it and never think about it after that. It was really rough. Not the first time this year the Huskies had a tough game. We messaged a little bit after the game. It felt like it was really just like running the ball, stopping the run, passing the ball, stopping the pass, kicking the ball, and covering kicks where the Huskies were badly outplayed by Penn State. It was really rough. 35-6 final score, and Penn State was up 28-0. It was never really competitive. Is there anything? It seemed like the focal point, Mark, may have been the Husky offensive line. It was just like a tidal wave every time Will Rogers or later Demont Williams dropped back to pass. Eventually, as I mentioned, the quarterback was switched. Jedd Fisch decided we were better off in this game, whether it was for competitive reasons or developmental reasons, to give Demont Williams a few snaps. Do you have any thoughts on the overall offensive performance and then the switch at quarterback as well?
I don't think any of what this offense did and did not do surprised me at this point. I mean, it was the same mistakes that we've been making all year. You know, the stupid penalties, the weird routes that are run short of the sticks, the weird short passes, and Jonah Coleman couldn't break any tackles, so he couldn't get going. Uh, and I think that all comes back to the continuity on the line, which is something that I wrote about this week in the three things we learned. But Demond did do some good things, but at that point, I didn't expect us to come back and win the game. I was just hoping for an offensive spark, and for that purpose, Demond provided that. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's got great escapability, like shook off a couple sacks in the pocket, threw to a wide open Decker DeGraff, and Decker just couldn't hang on. So yeah, that was kind of the only bright spot.
Yeah, I took it as purely developmental that, we've played in several close games. We know that Fisch wanted Williams to get plenty of snaps this year just for chances to play with the first team in live game action. And he hasn't had a lot of those since non-conference play. The game was basically over when he came in. It wasn't the chances that the Huskies were going to come back and win were like, less than 1% chance. So it was just an opportunity for Williams to get some live snaps. And I think maybe people read more into that because last year at Arizona, Fisch changed quarterbacks from Jaden DeLaura to Noah Fafita. That doesn't mean that every time you get snaps for a backup quarterback, it's the prelude to benching your starter. It could just be snaps for a backup quarterback when there's not really a reason to have the starter out there anymore. And for what it's worth, if we want to get to bowl eligibility, we still need Will Rogers. So like letting him get absolutely trounced by this defensive line isn't going to help in that respect either. Ray, could you find, looking at the other side of the ball, any more bright spots on defense? It seemed like, going in, the idea would be like load up the box, take away the run, make Drew Aller beat us with the pass. And then from very early on, we weren't really loading up the box. Drew Aller was still beating us with the pass. They were running the ball very easily against our kind of lighter boxes. Was there anything you saw that was a little bit less fatalistic or depressing?
I mean, it was very hard to find some even days later. I mean, like, if you're looking for like a positive takeaway just for the sake of one night, then you can point out Carson Bruner, how well he played. But, moving forward, how much of a bright spot is that really when he's gonna end up being another guy that you're gonna have to replace? So, it was tough. I think for me, it was also tough to be frustrated given just what Penn State is and what Penn State has been building over the years. That it's kind of like, okay, these guys are better, and if they execute how they should execute, then that's probably going to be the result 9 times out of 10. But it was still a little discouraging just because you thought, okay, maybe if they can get Penn State to if they can disrupt the run a little bit and then make them start relying on the pass, we'll be able to find success. But Drew Aller, obviously, a lot better this year than he is last year. Last year, that probably would have worked. This year, I don't think you can really beat Penn State like that unless you have elite talent on defense. So, yeah, that's a long way to say not really any bright spots, but also I don't want to be overly critical given it's kind of what we expected.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that I felt, a little bit hopeful is there were games earlier this year where Penn State, like they beat Illinois 21-7. I don't think Illinois is an elite defense. I think our defense is on par with theirs. Just last week, they had 13 points against Ohio State. Ohio State is an elite defense, but 13 points at home, no offensive touchdowns. Maybe there's an opportunity there. They also scored 33 on the road against USC. And they had other games where they were probably could have scored more points, but they were winning late and just kind of took it easy. Um, we didn't get that same grace. They did not take it easy. We gave up 28 points in the first half. We did make them look like an offensive juggernaut, so that's a little bit depressing. So we have 2 games left. Obviously, UCLA this week, which we'll talk about more in part 2, and then Oregon, which is looking like a pretty tall task. I asked both of you, what's left to learn about this team over the last 2 games, and what is it that's kind of keeping you engaged and excited about Husky football, if that's even the case, over the next couple weeks and hopefully a bowl game? Mark, I'll start with you.
So obviously, this week is all about getting that sixth win. But even if you don't do that, I still feel like there's opportunities to, like we did with Demond, kind of integrate the younger guys, Adam Muhammad, Keith Reynolds, Rashid Williams, Kamari House, guys like that. And Coach Fish was like, yeah, we just got to get, in his presser, he mentioned something interesting about Drew as a party where he's like, yeah, he's got to put on some weight in the summer and then, or like he's got to get in the weight room this summer or something like that. So he's clearly kind of looking forward to next year. So I don't know if that's a detriment to us going into UCLA, but yeah, we just gotta watch, gotta try to win this next game, but failing that, we've got to watch out for the young guys.
Yeah, that's a good point. How about you, Ray?
Yeah, I think the young guys are definitely intriguing. I'd keep that same answer. I'd also say how the team responds to, what's been a discouraging season thus far, but how do they approach these last 2 games? Because not only do you have an opportunity to become eligible, but at the end of the road is Oregon. Huge rivalry game, and it's in a new slot this week where it's like really fitting for rivalry week now, replacing what had been the Apple Cup in previous seasons. And how up is the team for those games going into that game? I think that says a lot about Jed Fish and like his control of the locker room, like how engaged guys are staying, who's looking ahead at maybe as a portal or the NFL draft. That stuff is, I think it's pretty important because if Jed Fish is going to be the guy long term, and if he's going to be the guy who gets things going back the way we want them to go, I mean, we're only one 1 year removed from being there, but if he's gonna take that program in that direction, I think seeing how the team responds to him in these last 2 games will tell us a lot. Because I mean, if you can't get your team to be excited about a chance to get to a bowl game and a chance to go knock off Oregon on the road, it's going to be tough to sell your team to recruits and to transfers and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they should be able to stay engaged. I hope that there's no issue on the coaching staff or the roster with their engagement. Maybe a little bit of a tougher sell for some of us as fans, but I think both of you make good points. Like the bowl eligibility is something worth fighting for, even if it's not going to be, a Peach Bowl or a Rose Bowl or a Cotton Bowl or something. But still, getting the extra practices. That used to be such a big deal to me. Like when Sark was the coach and we had a lot of seasons where bowl eligibility was on the line late in the year. In my head, I was so obsessed with getting the extra 2 or 3 weeks of practices for the players. Um, I don't know if I feel the same way anymore. I feel like there's more opportunities. They're better organized in the spring and the summer and everything, but it's not a bad thing. And like Mark said about the offensive line development, we're going to bring back a lot of players and a lot of young players. Like Drew has a party, uh, Fasolo, Landon Hatchett, Zachary Henning will probably they've all seen playing time this year, and they're all like sophomores, redshirt freshmen. The offensive line is a position where playing together and having time to physically develop really make a difference. Like it's not a running back where you kind of like show up and if you can't break a tackle, you're probably never going to break a tackle. Um, it's a position where you can develop your technique, you can develop your body, and I think just because we were not good on the offensive line this year doesn't mean that we're doomed as long as these players are here. So hopefully that's an area where we can get some progress over the rest of the year and into next year as well. Let's end part one there, and we'll come back. We'll talk about UCLA. We'll talk a little bit about recruiting. We'll talk a little bit about basketball. So stick with us, and we'll be back for part two. Thanks for sticking with us. We're going to talk about the UCLA game coming up this week. As we mentioned in part one, this game will go pretty much the whole way to determining Washington's bowl eligibility because the Oregon road game against the number one team in the country is going to be a tall task. UCLA has won 3 in a row after starting 1-5. Looking back at their schedule, they played LSU, Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State consecutively early in the year. I don't think we really appreciated how good Indiana was at that time, and even LSU has kind of raised their stature after losing that early game to USC. Last week, UCLA beat Iowa, which was an impressive win. They also recently beat Rutgers and Nebraska to get now to 4-5. They're an interesting team, Ray. Our old friend Ethan Garbers is kind of their offensive centerpiece. He's inconsistent. He's got 11 interceptions. He runs the ball a lot, but not all that well. The rest of the running game is kind of mediocre, but they're coming together. And how does this offense, like, how has it changed over the course of the year, and how do you think it matches up with Washington's defense?
But yeah, it's really interesting because you wouldn't look like if you were going to their season totals, you wouldn't guess that this team is starting to win games because they've only had 3 rushing touchdowns on the season, which is kind of crazy to think about, especially since we're so late into it. And that you would think that that means that, oh, their quarterback must be putting up like these wild numbers, but he's only thrown 12 touchdowns. And it's like, it's kind of hard to fathom until you watch UCLA play, but they just find a way to win games. And how that stacks up for the Huskies, I mean, it's been tough with the types of offenses that they faced this year, but UCLA, they're going to be a little bit more familiar. It's going to be like just like USC was. Like it's more of your style of football. Like you've been building defenses over the years to be able to beat teams like this because they're a Pac-12 team rather than a Big Ten team with these huge bodies on the offensive line. It's gonna run the ball, and has these like Tyler Warren type of tight ends that apparently can do anything, which was interesting. And so I think I'm excited for the matchup from the Huskies' perspective. And I think if they can score the ball and they can kind of speed UCLA's offense up and force Ethan Garbers to throw some 50-50 balls, then the Huskies would really, really benefit because clearly he's fine with throwing it up for grabs and trusting his receivers. It's burned him sometimes. It's worked out for him. So it's really a lot of it's going to go down to how the Huskies offense performs. And as long as they don't let UCLA's rushing attack all of a sudden come alive, then I think the matchup works pretty well because we've seen the Huskies' pass defense play pretty well in most games if we throw out the film from last weekend.
Yeah, I think that's probably true that looking at last week doesn't tell us a lot about this week. And you're probably right that we're going to need to score some points early to put pressure on UCLA offense. Mark, what do you think about our opportunities to do that? UCLA's defense has been not elite this year, but they have been uh, forcing more turnovers the last few weeks. That's been kind of a key to their resurgence. Do you think we kind of lean heavily on Jonah Coleman, or do we try to establish the pass game early and trust that Will Rogers will take care of the ball? And like, do you think this is a defense where we can put up some early points and put pressure on their offense?
Well, Will has been very he hasn't thrown a lot of interceptions. But just just looking at the way he plays quarterback within this system, it hasn't really impressed me very much, especially the last few weeks. But then again, last week was unfair. It's unfair to judge Will based on last week, but this has been going on for a while. So yeah, I think we do need a heavier dose of Jonah Coleman. Uh, I don't know if he's gonna get like the 23 carries, but maybe you can get him going, kind of establish the run, and then Will plays off of that, which is kind of what a pro style offense is built for. Um, but yeah, Jonah needs, I think, between 20 and 25 touches, not 20 and 25 carries, but get him the ball.
Yeah, I think that would be certainly as the game goes on, the longer the game goes, hopefully we can wear down the defense and really rely on him in the second half. But also hopeful that the intermediate pass game will be available early on. We'll see enough on the offensive line to at least create some opportunities for Rodgers. I think you're probably right about the fit being of this air raid quarterback who wants to kind of like survey the field and make quick decisions, being asked to run a play action offense where he's kind of interacting with the running back and then taking his time and moving around in the pocket. It looks a little bit more awkward against these elite defenses. And like you said, the offensive line isn't really there to support either. Um, there's another interesting wrinkle to this game, which is not a competitive one, but a financial one, which is a sponsorship deal with Warcraft, where it looks like there will be Warcraft themed or World of Warcraft themed mascots on the field. And I don't know what else it will entail, but I've seen some graphics for like a UW logo, Warcraftified, if that's a word. Uh, Mark, I know you're a hardcore video game person, or at least have been. You know a bit about Activision Blizzard and the Warcraft cinematic universe. What do you think of the relationship here, and like what are you thinking about UW even like kind of dipping their toe in the water of this sort of sponsorship?
So yeah, Andrew, you're correct. I do not play WoW. I have no interest in playing WoW. Uh, my first thought was, why? Like this is just bizarre. Like I get like a deal where like oh it's a one-time thing where you do like sponsored posts, but this is a whole branding thing. Like there are jerseys and there are helmets and like there's going to be sponsored posts with the players and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, especially because WoW is not a game that like the average like high school recruit is going to be interested in playing. So it just doesn't like forgive me for sounding like an old man, but it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know anything about my brother plays World of Warcraft. I'm not really familiar with it. It doesn't have like a natural relationship. I think the short answer is money and hopefully lots of money.
Yes.
Uh, we've heard a lot about how the new era of college football really revolves around your ability to generate revenue and not always through the traditional TV and ticket sale revenue streams, but finding new ones as well. And also, we've heard plenty about how Washington is lagging behind some of our top competitors in NIL funds and um, facilities in some cases. So hopefully, none of these numbers are disclosed to us, but it is a creative revenue stream, even if it's not like the most natural link. I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it's going to change the outcome of the game. Um, I've seen the jerseys that they're going to wear on Saturday, and they look great. So I don't think they're World of Warcraft has somehow poisoned the jerseys. So other than that, I think I will get by. Ray, I know you and I among our UW writers group probably have the strongest feelings about uniforms. Not always on the same page, but I think we agreed on this week's editions. What are you thinking about for the people who haven't seen them? Profile it a little bit, but what was your the cause for your enthusiastic endorsement of this uniform?
So to bring back the blackout look, which it was like a surprise reveal, which wasn't all that surprising considering they hadn't worn them yet. But we finally got to see the uniform, we got to see the helmet, and it's actually really nice. I liked the blackout uniforms that during the Jake Browning days. I liked the ones during the Keith Price days, even though, oh yeah, Keith Price, he had the black helmets too. I preferred the ones from the Keith Price days, but these ones I think are the best of the bunch. It has black and then it has a good mix of purple and gold in it, and it's like it doesn't feel like they're going super far away from team colors. It just feels like kind of how you should do an alternate uniform where it's like, hey, we're gonna switch it up, but we're gonna stay with, what our brand is. And it has a good mix of chrome in, especially on the face masks. And I love chrome. I'm very vocal about that frequently on Slack. And so I mean, like when you wear uniforms like that, you can have any game, anybody you want sponsor you. I'm completely on board if that's the result. Hopefully, it leads to more creative uniform choices. I think one of my biggest complaints is that I'm all for a tradition. When I was younger, I wouldn't have said that, but it's grown on me a little bit. I love traditional uniforms, but I also think if you have alternate uniforms that recruits enjoy wearing on photo shoots, that you probably should wear them because they're trying to tell you that they like the uniform. I like
Yeah,
this
that's a good
a lot.
point. Yeah.
So
Uh,
I'm gonna jump in here before we move on. Do y'all remember the first game where we wore black uniforms?
I was there. It was my first Husky game ever, actually. So
Oh, I thought it was the UCLA game in 2010, but it was also on a
yeah,
Friday night.
yep, it was a night game, and it
Was
was
that the one?
that was my first time going to see a game at Husky Stadium, and it was cold, but it was fun.
I remember that game because I was working at UW at the time, and I think that was the first Friday night home game in a very long time. Because it was absolute havoc for university employees and the parking situation. Um, and we had a lot of like administrative work to do with making sure people knew obviously the football field parking lots are employee parking lots during the day. So we had to figure out where people were going to park during the day so they could get out because people would be showing up for the football game while they were still at work. And a lot of the UW hospital employees were UW Med Center employees had nowhere else to go. So I hope that's interesting, but it is a definite digression on that UW UCLA football game. I don't remember what happened in the game. Was that
I
a
don't
that
either,
we
and I was
lost that
there.
one,
I
didn't
think we
we?
ended up winning. Let me pull it up real quick. Here we go. Yep.
One twenty.
UW against UCLA win 24-7.
That was a win.
Yep.
Oh, I
Let's
clearly
look
was
at the
not paying
box score here.
attention.
Yeah.
So Jake
Also,
Locker went 10 for 21 for 68 yards and an interception,
Oh,
but The real kicker here, Chris Polk, 26 carries for 138 yards and a touchdown.
The legend.
Yep.
Chris Polk was awesome.
Yeah.
That's not identical, but similar in the sense that it was a Friday night must-win home game against UCLA to get bowl eligibility. That wasn't our last game of the year, but this one we had to beat Cal and Wazoo on the road after that to get to 6 wins. But they did it, and then they had that miraculous Holiday Bowl win, which I think was also a black uniform game, wasn't it?
It was. I
Yep.
remember that.
Interesting. Okay. Let's briefly touch on the recruiting landscape. It was a eventful week. There was a big decommit. Tight end Vander Plug, who's one of the top recruits in the 2025 class, flipped to Oregon, as had been rumored for a long time after Oregon started to really push for him. But then 2026 linebacker Wasi Lugolobi, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but I'm sure we'll learn over the next 5 to 6 years. He's a local linebacker, one of the top recruits in the 2026 class in Washington State, did commit. Any strong impressions from either of you about who I am now calling Darth Vander, who has embraced the dark side and who never had a cool name to begin with, or Wasi coming in, who has a very cool name, much cooler than Vander Plug. Feelings about this essential trade that we made in the recruiting or recruiting classes?
Vander was the chosen one, and he flipped.
Yeah. Well, he chose the dark side. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. That's the news. We'll see how it plays out. More something that's actually emerging on the basketball side. The Danny Sprinkle era got its first loss against Nevada, who's a quality Mountain West opponent. People may forget, but last year the Mountain West was absolutely stacked. So, like, losing to one of the good Mountain West teams, this has always looked like one of the tougher non-conference games on the schedule. It would have been nice to win, but another tough shooting night. Ray, did you have any takeaways from this early loss?
Yeah, it's interesting watching the team play. You can tell that they're still trying to get familiar with each other, and that just feels like it's the story for a lot of Husky athletics this year. I think the team, it'll be interesting to see how they mold as the winter months go and then Big Ten play arrives. And like just to see if there's any shot of them making a run in the Big Ten. I don't foresee like any regular season or conference championships for the team just because I mean if you don't watch basketball, if you don't watch college basketball, just know the Big Ten is very, very, very good. And so that's tough. But yeah, shooting is definitely definitely a work in progress, and you're not going to win a lot of games these days without good shooting. If they can eventually become an elite shooting team, then I really like what they do under Sprinkle. I mean, they defend pretty well. I think they're still trying to find that identity. It's just tough. It's when you have so many new players on a basketball court and they're trying to like figure everything out. It has some serious growing pains, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
The Huskies also got kind of late breaking news happened during the day on Tuesday, a commitment from JJ Mandequit, who's one of I think he's like a top 50 recruit in next year's class. He's a true floor general point guard, 6'1", kind of a like bulldog physical point guard, but excellent passer and can play really good on-ball defense. So it will be a really nice thing to add to this team. They've got a couple of talented combo guards already, like Zoom Diallo is one, but adding somebody who can kind of get all these playmakers into space and allow them to make plays, I think will unlock a lot more offensive efficiency for that roster. But let's get into our recommendations and plugs for this week. Ray, is there any non-football related things that you have been watching or reading or listening to or eating or experiencing that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so backstory that will lead into the plug. My girlfriend's birthday was last week, and that's the backstory. And to
Plug to
celebrate,
birthdays and girlfriends.
and yeah, and to celebrate, I got her tickets to Sabrina Carpenter's concert here in San Diego, which was on Sunday, and I have never like really dove into Sabrina Carpenter's music. I've heard like the viral clips on TikTok and social media and all of that. But going there and watching her perform, one, I had no idea that she's like as popular as she is. I knew she was popular, but it was a packed stadium. Everybody knew every word to every song. It was pretty incredible. And two, she is an amazing performer. And I mentioned the only other concert that I've been to was the Kendrick Lamar concert for his latest album, which was like 2 years ago. And he's a great performer. And watching her, she's an amazing performer. She's a great live singer. So for anybody that enjoys like pop stars or like pop music, then I would recommend that because we went and listened to her music after, and I was like, oh, it's still not something that I would listen to like on my day to day, but I can recognize good music when I hear it. So Sabrina Carpenter gets today's plug, which I didn't envision a month ago, but here we are.
Yeah, as a father of a 5-year-old girl, I've become well versed in like the female pop star landscape, and I will say, I'm not embarrassed to admit that Sabrina Carpenter, I kind of put at the top of that list. At least it has a sense of humor. It's not all whiny and sad.
Mhm.
So not
It's very
terrible.
it's quality, like quality music, like everything like the her singing and like the just everything about it is just super high quality. I was really impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I know she got famous kind of from touring with Taylor Swift as like the gatekeeper to all popular music now. Mark, do you have any I'm guessing yours is not going to be like I don't know, Vanessa Hudgens or some other teen pop
Wow,
icon.
that's a pull.
I don't know. I'm exposing my own ignorance here.
Uh, I just want to update everyone. Portland is currently up 2 on U of O. So shout out to the Portland Pilots and shout out to Big Sky Basketball. This could look very bad by tomorrow.
Yeah,
There's only
that'll be
31
good.
seconds left. I just looked it up as you were talking about it.
Yeah, because like I was trying to look at Husky stats and then I realized, whoa, Portland's up on Oregon.
Yeah, I mean that's geographically true, and it's also true in basketball sense. Um, I'm gonna recommend a new album in a different direction. It by Sturgill Simpson. It's called Passage du Désir. He's I don't even know, kind of a roots musician, kind of a little bit of a country musician. I've been following him for several years, kind of in the like his voice reminds me a little bit of Waylon Jennings, but he's got a great band, and this new album is very listenable. He's definitely veered away from kind of traditional country music, but he's a super interesting musician and one of the few like modern musicians where I still get fired up about a new album coming out. So worth checking out. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Ray. And thanks to Cody Pickett, although we don't have time for the interview today. We'll hopefully get back to that. In the meantime, thanks to all of you for listening, and go Dogs.
Go
Go
dogs.
Dogs.